Welcome to the Basketball and Brew podcast produced by Jude McLaren, and I am your host, Dan Miller. Thank you for joining us for this week's podcast, and please help us out by subscribing to our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you are watching, and please give us a follow on Twitter. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, both right here in beautiful San Marcos, Texas. Pie Society is an excellent stop in San Marcos for great New York-style pizzas made with the freshest ingredients, local beers on tap, and overall fun and cool vibe. And come into Zellick's Ice House for their happy hour drink specials, spacious outside patio, and a great time with friends. We are excited to welcome Grand Canyon University head women's basketball coach Molly Miller to the podcast. Miller enters the 2023-24 season with an .846 winning percentage and a career record of 241-44. At Grand Canyon University, Miller has compiled a 61-27 overall record and 34-14 in conference, while solidifying GCU Arena as one of the toughest places to play with a 37-8 record at home and 2 appearances in the WAC conference final in only 3 seasons. Coach, thank you for coming on our podcast.
Thanks for having me. I love talking basketball this time of year when we're out of season. It gives me a little taste and something to look forward to.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to talking ball and about your team and your successes and, of course, your pressure defense. But before we do, Coach, how's your summer been and how is recruiting and bringing your new team on campus? How's it all going there?
It's been awesome. Well, I celebrated a 7-year-old. My daughter turned 7 a day ago. So
happy birthday. Yep.
That's been fun to have the family around and,
right.
Having your secondary family around your basketball community. Our kids are on campus doing workouts right now. Honestly, just really excited about this team that we have. We've got a great core group of returners, and then we've added a lot of experience with some of our portal transfers. So we've kind of tossed the ball out a little bit and let them play without any kind of rhyme or reason, and that's been fun for our kids, but fun for us too, to see what pieces we have and how we're going to work and make the brand of defense even bigger and better. And then offensively, we're working on some things with pace, and we want to score quick and in bunches. So I'm really excited about this team.
Right. And I read about some of the transfers you have coming in. Very exciting. Coach, I got to ask about blending a team together and team chemistry when you have transfers and returners. Are there certain things that you do to blend them at this time of year or in the fall before the season actually kicks off?
Yeah, I think spending time together, but like genuine time, like we don't try to force too many things upon this team. I want it to happen very organically and naturally, and they're older. So they've done all the team bonding experiences and excursions and this and that. So we're trying to like kind of do more quality maybe over quantity. And I also think this group gets it. Like they're wise in that way too. And they know that a team is comprised of a bunch of individuals working together, and they're really figuring that out quickly, and they want it too. I mean, again, there's really no magic team bonding experience you can have besides like putting a bunch of like-minded individuals together and letting them kind of feel out how they accomplish their goals. So I think on our end as coaches, that's really important. Like you've got to recruit players not only into your system, but like fit your belief system and how to run a program. And part of that for me is competitors. Like I want to just, whether it's a good day or a bad day, they're competing. And when you have a bunch of those players, then I think that builds chemistry more than anything. You're going on the battlefield together. And for me, it's more, getting those kids that would fit in the system really nicely. But then when you get a bunch of them together, then they're going to form their own team chemistry because they've got that kind of mind thought process themselves. So it's been good to see all the experience and the new faces be welcomed in, but also them kind of form their own team identity. Every year you're going to have new team identity. I'm really excited about this one this year.
Right. No, y'all are going to have a great, I know you're knocking on the door for that WAC championship, and I know that's the goal. And you brought in an experienced coach, and this seems like this year's team, some of the, just looking at the roster that you've formed, has some experience. And is that age, is that something in college basketball now, seen on the men's side, like San Diego's team was just older and they got to the Final Four. Is that something you look forward to with this team?
Yeah, I think it's going to be so valuable for us in terms of leaders running a team and being able to orchestrate some things that we want to get done on the court, but also having the savvy and knowledge of what it takes outside the X's and O's, your habits, your sleep habits, your nutrition habits, your social habits. So I think that goes into play also. And in this day and age, it's a little bit tough. I think if freshmen aren't playing and competing right away, then there's an opportunity for them to maybe go into the portal and
Right.
maybe not have that patience. And I think these kids get it. Like they
Right.
get it might not be an overnight thing for them as they come in. That the progress is kind of the success of the measure of success. So I love that with this team is they're just wanting to work hard and they're kind of steady that way. And
Right.
that's a good thing for sure for us when it comes to experience.
Right. I'm excited to watch them this coming year and see what you do with them, Coach. And I know defense is so important to you in your career. In 9 years, this will be your 10th year, I believe, as a head coach. You've had great defensive teams. Can I ask, what is the first thing that you do to implement your pressure defense? Do you start right off the bat with the press, or do you break it from the half court and extend it out? What does that first practice look like when you're implementing that pressure defense?
It's super detail oriented. So we start with breakdown drills. Like we
Okay.
do tons of breakdown drills, but I will say it's not breakdown drills that aren't just going through motions. They're breakdown drills leading up to how we would get steals in the grand scheme of the defense. So
Okay.
that's the biggest thing as a coach that I've learned. Like, don't do a drill just to do a drill.
Right.
Obviously, you want to work on fundamentals, but maybe how do those fundamentals play into your overall concepts? We actually practice the steals we're going to get in the game.
Mm.
So we don't just talk about them and do a drill and hope to get those steals. We practice those steals, whether it's one pass away steals, on ball defense steals, trapping steals, rotation steals. We actually break it down and practice it.
Right.
It's kind of funny this summer we haven't done a lot of defense, and I know you would have never expected to hear that from me, but when we put in our defense we can't run offense. So like I wanted to get an offensive base before
Right.
we started like trapping and rotating and getting all these turns. So we've actually kind of pulled back on the defensive end in the summer. At least we'll probably hit it really hard when we get back for school. But
Right.
that's going to allow us our offense to actually figure out some rhythm because our defense is projected to try to get teams out of rhythm. So if you put in the defense right away, then our offense will struggle. But I love breaking it down and then seeing the big picture. And our kids are really bought into I call it a skinny. It's like a little miniature drill within a drill. So just to
Mm-hmm.
slice a skinny portion of the.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of skinnies within practice. I might stop the shell drill, blow my whistle, and say, okay, we're going to do a 2-minute skinny. And it could be closeouts. Like we're not closing out properly.
Okay.
So we'll do a quick skinny. Again, a little slice of it, a little part of the whole. And we'll do that drill. And then we'll go back to the big picture. And hopefully the closeouts will look a lot better because we've taken time to stop and do a little skinny.
Right. Oh, I like that, Coach. And is that something that you maybe don't have written into the practice plan when you're going to do those skinnies? You just as the head coach, like we need to work on the closeouts and grab them, and we start doing them.
Absolutely. Let's say I have a 90 minutes scheduled for my practice plan. I'll always, my practice plan will be 60 minutes because I know we're going to do some skinnies in there or go over a little bit or do a little bit more teaching or if something's really going good, we'll like let them roll with it and like we won't stop them. So yeah, it's like built in outside of the actual planned work.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. A skinny coach. That's great. And then can I ask you, when you want to pressure the way you do and your teams do, when you get a player, maybe who's a really good player, because obviously you recruited them, they're on your team, but they're used to sprinting back on defense, because in high school they never pressed and they had to have great transition defense. Is it hard sometimes to break that as a freshman? And what are some of the things you do to get them to get up and trap and do the things that you want on defense?
Yeah, we use terminology that tries to stick,
Mm.
and I'll say it often. Their teammates who are returning, I'll say it often. So eventually, when the terminology clicks in their brain, what I'm supposed to do, they'll do it. But yeah, they'll go back to bad habits. We've got some freshmen that are playing way far back in the gaps, and we do not like that's foreign to me. Like we get up in the passing lane,
Right.
so it's just natural when that pass goes away, they're getting back
Right.
and kind of playing that pack line style. So it's just with them especially we did a session where I just took the incoming kids and the returners did some other piece of work on the other
Hmm.
end, and so I didn't bore them by going through the basics, but I also needed to start somewhere with these new kids. So I think
Right.
it's adapting a little bit to who you have and who needs work on what, and being able, that's why my staff is so great too. Like they can
Mm-hmm.
take the group down there and run a practice themselves basically.
Right.
And I can do the same thing on the other end with different needs, especially in these early stages. So I think for us, we're just, the breakdown part is crucial. And
Right.
then obviously being able to implement that and kind of getting them on track. One of the greatest coaches that I learned from, it was SMSU back then, Missouri State now, but Cheryl Burnett, I was
Mm-hmm.
a ball girl, and we'll watch her coach and be on the sidelines. And she said something, this is her quote, repetition penetrates even the dullest of minds.
Mm.
So
Yep.
not that we're, calling our players dull minded, but like, even if you can't get something right away because your brain isn't used to processing
Right.
you're doing, then reps, you'll eventually break that habit and form a new one. So I
Right.
just think repetition. And then, for example, on the press, we don't say, diamond, or we don't call it a number for a press. We say
Mm-hmm.
tag,
Yep.
because that's literally the verb that we want to do. We want to go nose to nose, pick up someone in a denial type look. So tag, it's very simple, but
Yep.
it's telling them what I want to do. And then for some of those that just want to run back, it's like, oh no, oh yeah, I got a tag.
Yep.
So we say that in practice, and then we'll repeat in the games, and so they're constantly hearing that. So that's kind of a change of habit by just having your verbiage kind of click, but then also repetition.
Right. I love that clear terminology. And coach, within that terminology, then when you're pressed, would you say that you have a list of maybe guidelines or rules that, you go over with them? I'm not sure if they turn your back or,
Mhm.
pick up at this certain point and that you cover. Is that
Yeah,
the terminology you use? Mm-hmm.
yeah, we don't just let them loose. I mean, it's
Right. Right.
very, because when everyone talks to me about my press, like, oh my gosh, this seems so risky to run up and trap and double team
Mm-hmm.
and have someone water bug their way through it when you're flying around. But honestly, it's organized chaos, like you're talking about. We've
Yep.
got kind of 3 rules of double teaming, and we
Mm-hmm.
practice those rules and we practice the rotations. One of my favorite sayings that I use with our kids, like, 2 wrongs make a wrong.
Yeah.
If someone went when they weren't supposed to go, then you're like, well, they didn't go, and that's why I wasn't supposed to go, because they weren't supposed to go. Well, they went, so
Yep.
then you have to go.
Right.
One goes, we all go in our trapping scenarios. So again, you have to be able to play off some instinct, but I think you can put them in scenarios where the instinct will kick in, even though it might not be the right play to have made. But if your teammate's doing something, you have to play off them and their moves. So everything works together. I love the defense because it really kind of forces you to be unselfish on both ends, because everyone has to be on the same page on defense. And you
Right.
don't want to be that outlier, that one person that doesn't rotate or doesn't trap hard or isn't in the play, because everyone else is working their tail off. So it's kind of conducive to unselfish basketball, because on the defensive end, you have to have 5 people going hard, playing with a motor, playing with pace, being on the same page. Because if one person doesn't rotate, then
Right.
we're kind of um, in trouble. So I think for us, the main point is, you got to continue to play together, but also mistakes can be covered up by
Yep.
hustle and hard work. And so if
Yep.
all 5 people are doing that, then the chaos, it looks a little bit hectic and frantic, but we've practiced those things, and
Right.
we're very kind of disciplined on what we do when we go and how we do it.
Right. And I love that the 2 wrongs don't make a right. And if one goes, I'll go. I mean, right? Because if one person traps a little earlier than you want, it sounds like you're not going to get angry. Just everyone's going to play hard and rotate out of that. And that's what you want sometimes, right? I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. You're just kind of mixing it up to where they think about it. Like you said, the saying is 2 wrongs don't make a right, but like, it's 2 wrongs make a wrong for
Yeah.
us.
Right. Right.
So we're
Exactly.
trying to definitely just have them think through the whole 30,000 view, but also how you individually definitely play into the bigger brand of defense.
Right. And with the girls playing that hard, coach, do you have a bigger rotation than most people in your conference, would you say? Because, I watched the Synergy film, they play hard.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious to see how that affects then maybe how many you play in a game.
Yeah, we try. I think some people in February, March go down to 7.5, 8, 9,
Mm.
maybe 9 on their bench.
Hmm.
That's lucky. We're still trying to go 9, 10, 11,
Okay.
12 deep. So that's what's fun. It's a fun brand to play, but you also have an opportunity. At any
Right.
point, your number could be called, and you're out there flying around, playing hard with your teammates. So we don't quite hockey sub it, but we definitely have the potential to go deep into our bench.
Right. And what about playing and guarding? Do you want all your players to be able to guard 1 through 5? Because I noticed some peel switching that takes place, and is that something that's important to you? That if you're a guard, you're on a big, you're going to fight in front, or guarding bigs, guarding guards.
Yeah, when you're always in kind of rotational defense,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be mismatched until you can switch back or until you can get another trap. So we play how, a mouse in the house, how we want to guard that if you're small and you're going against the big, or how a big needs to play their angles and their length if they're out on the perimeter. And ideally we have some, it's this whole scheme, but even if there's a mismatch, it kind of works in our favor a little bit because we'll trap out of a lot of matches. Right. So, and then a team kind of focuses on one thing, and we know we've got our point guard on their big. They're going to focus to get it onside. It's an automatic double. Like they know that. And sometimes that works to our advantage. So it's just, again, practicing those different scenarios that you put them in, those skinnies, if you will, where you do have those mismatches. Well, okay, a point guard's now sizing up our center at the top of the key. What's everyone going to do?
Right.
We'll flood the basketball a little bit. So, and then get into rotations that way. So, when you have those mismatch scenarios, how they could potentially play out and what your other teammates could do to maybe make it advantageous instead of disadvantage.
Sure. Can I ask, Coach, a typical practice, how much you spend on one side or the other side, or do you let it kind of come out organically in your live play? I know some coaches we've had on our podcast said 70% or 80% is devoted to offense or defense. Is there a way to chart that, or what would you say a typical practice would be like?
I think it changes year to year, kind of based on what I have. Like the first year, oh my gosh, it was like 75% defense.
Yeah.
And then, I wanted my offense to catch up to the defense. So the second year we were kind of maybe more even. This year, I think we've got a lot of talented offensive players. Like we have defensive players that fit into the system phenomenally, but I don't think they're going to take as much time to go over what the defense looks like and have to break it down as much. So I think we'll be able to focus on offense just as much as the defensive part. But it does, we kind of do a unique thing. The very first week we can start having full practices. We do camp week.
Okay.
And every day is a different camp. So we'll have like camp go, and that's all about transition. Or 3-on-2 and 2-on-1 and finishes and breaking down those things, like pace. That's really our pace is based on their motor. And so camp go is just a lot of getting out and running or flying around. We'll do some trapping, but then we'll have an offensive day and a defensive day. Camp lockdown is our defensive day. I love camp lockdown because it is all defense. That's the only thing we do. And they know that coming in. We're not going to do anything offensively. So we kind of put in just, again, all the basics of each day. And then after that week, we'll kind of mix it up. But, camp grit is all the toughness thing. That's where we get our identity, the screens, the rebounds, the charges. So we kind of have 5 days, and at the end, that weekend is camp fun.
Okay.
So last year we rented a pontoon and a ski boat. We went out to Lake Pleasant, and we were all on the lake and doing tubing and skiing and wakeboarding. So I love camp week, but it's a good week for us to kind of put in everything and just focus on one piece at a time. They know they're not going to get distracted by defense on the offensive day. They're not going to get distracted by just all the screening and the rebounding stuff on our go day, our pace day. So it's kind of a fun little breakdown to start off the season for us.
Oh, I love that, Coach. So grit, lockdown, fun. You end with fun. Go day. Okay, those are great. Yeah, I love that. And I bet you they know that the fun's coming at the end to get through grit. They're talking about, hey, we got to get through this. We're going to have camp fun if we get through.
Yeah, there's definitely a build up, and then we get to all hang and enjoy each other's company.
That's so great, Coach. And speaking of company, I know family is so important to you with your husband and your 2 kids and bringing them around and modeling that for your girls and creating a family atmosphere. Another thing that I took that I saw was your Benergy. We had talked about that off the air, just, your bench energy. How important is the whole family concept within your program?
I mean, I think this is our lives. These are our daily
Mm-hmm.
lives around these kids and the kids around us. And we might see them more than, our immediate family on the daily. And so
Right.
for us, it's about, I think, blending the two. I really like to do
Mm-hmm.
that. When I have the team over to my house, whether it's just, a summer day or a basketball game or,
Mm-hmm.
football playoffs or even a recruit, like
Mm-hmm.
we spend time together and all the assistants will bring their kids. And I think we're
Right.
up to like 5 now. So we've got like a whole crew that
Right.
looking up to our basketball players and they're the honorary big sisters
Mm-hmm.
and they adore one another. And I think for me, it's a special bond that you can
Right.
kind of see when you're mixing your family, with your basketball family. And this is something that not a lot of people get to experience. There's the sport is such a unique thing. There's
Mm-hmm.
highs and lows, but you get to
Yep.
experience them together. There's growth and there's setbacks, but you get to experience them together, and you get to work through those things together.
Right.
I'm a coach and a leader, but I also have my flaws. Like I'm not perfect. They're helping me learn every
Mm-hmm.
day about myself and how I can be better for them. And I'm going to be a better coach tomorrow than I was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we as coaches can continually replay that mantra in our head, then we can be better for those kids in terms of like real family, not just
Right.
going through the motions of
Yes.
you're getting a scholarship. I'm going to coach you through this sport called basketball, and then you're going to graduate after 4 years. So
Right.
I think for me, it's like, how do we better each other's life and enrich the experiences we have with one another?
Right. Oh, I love that, coach. Because yeah, it's easy to put family on a T-shirt and just say that, like some programs. But I can tell from the outside that you really have that there, and then y'all are modeling that, coach. I want to talk about games. Just switching gears a little bit. Pregame, halftime, postgame. So could you take me through a typical pregame? Not exactly what's up on the board, but what the board looks like what you're writing up there for your last talk before you take the court, or just some pregame that is important to you as the head coach within your program.
Yeah, one thing that we do that I really enjoy is they get some of their own time, but there's also some dedicated time before like our team pregame warm up
Mm-hmm.
for some position groups or even maybe a small group of 3 to work with our assistant coaches and go through. They've kind of made it theirs. Like, what does their pregame warm
Mm-hmm.
up want to look like? And it gets them in the zone. They get extra reps without, 5 balls flying around and 13 other bodies on half a court.
Right.
So we have slots for
Okay.
just small groups
Mm-hmm.
basically to get in and get work with. They've got all the attention. They've got 5 managers under the basket, an assistant coach, a graduate assistant. So they've got a lot of me time built
Yep.
in. And then while they're doing that, I'm kind of summarizing the game plan.
Mm-hmm.
At the top of our board, this is a little insider information. I don't think I've ever shared this.
Ooh, that's good.
We have, and we say it before you go out. To win, you have to hate to lose a little bit more than everyone else.
Okay.
Like that will
Yep.
remain on the top of our whiteboard all year. We never erase
Yep.
it.
Right. Right.
And that's kind of the last thing we say before we go out. But we'll do matchups. I'm gonna take a little bit of a different approach this year. Try to do like less is more. Like I don't
Okay.
want to
Mm-hmm.
talk for 20 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of like just zone out. So just some really important things. Are they a driver shooter? Which direction are they going? And then who's guarding those players? So we'll do the starters and then maybe 3 deep. And then we'll do kind of, again, just reminders of, we'll put the opponent's offense and defense, just some short
Mm-hmm.
reminders, and then us, offense and defense, some short reminders. How are we guarding screens? How do they guard screens? What kind of press they're in, what kind of press break we're in. Some offensive concepts. If we have any calls, kind of remind
Mm-hmm.
them of that. And then just 5 key points. And the last point, number 5, is always kind of funny. It's like a riddle, or it's like a hangman game, or
Mm-hmm.
they have to figure out what the word means. I'll make up words, and usually they kind of get it because it's some energy acronym,
Okay.
some
Mm-hmm.
sort of energy
Yep.
spin off on that. And then we'll end with our little quote: to win, you have to hate to lose a little bit more than everyone else. So
Yep.
that's it. We'll come back in for a second time. We'll have our prayer then,
Mm-hmm.
and then just kind of one or two quick reminders, and then we're off to the races.
Love it. Love it. Okay. That's great, Coach. I love what you put on the board there. Now we play the first half. Could be good, could be bad. Could you talk me through a halftime, how maybe you include some input from your players and staff and what that looks like at halftime?
Yeah, I've always wondered, like, what are teams doing at halftime?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of our routine is we'll huddle as a staff outside and we'll go through some quick, coaches' notes.
Right.
But while we're doing that, they have their own little we've got a great sports performance guy. Shout out to Zach. He has their own little concoctions made, refuel,
Right.
or this one needs electrolytes, or this one needs some sodium, this one needs, a carb, whatever it is.
Yep.
He's got them all set up. So they'll refuel, but then they'll also have a designated person will come to the board and they'll just write things that they see. So they'll write offense and defense, and the players will talk about it. So they'll have like about 5 bullet points on offense and 5 bullet points on defense that they see.
Okay.
Sometimes I just walk in and I start rambling, and I don't really. But then I look, I'm like, see, we saw that too. Like, you guys are talking about our screen coverage. We're not doing a great job of tagging the backside or weak side help. Like, you guys saw that. We're seeing that too, and an adjustment that we need to make. And usually they have it on the board with what we've talked about as well. So we kind of give them ownership in any adjustments that they think should be made or any points of emphasis. They'll write them on the board in their own little individual team huddle while we're huddling as coaches outside, and then kind of come together and game plan based off that. But they're smart kids, They see the game, they feel the game. So I definitely want to give them the opportunity to write up on the whiteboard what they want to change, or maybe what their scene's working or not working in the moment.
I love that, player-led coach's guide, and that seems to be what you have. Now, after the game then, Coach, do you meet – I know this is something that a lot of people are talking about. Do you meet with the team? Do you not meet with the team? Do you wait for the next day? Let's say you're playing at home. What does a post-game look like?
Yeah, it's kind of hard because players are grabbed. I'm grabbed. Everyone's grabbed in a different direction. So while that's going on, we encourage them to change. Maybe they might get a heat pack or start their any rehab post game that they need. Right. But we will they'll wait in the locker room for me, and we will try to meet as a team, do kind of a simple breakdown, hopefully a post game celebration.
Right.
Little dancing, some high fives. And then, so we do try to meet after the game and just talk through, the game. And I just think it's very important to, no matter what, we typically usually have great effort. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that all the time, because it's like, who do you want to be at the end of the day, and what do you want to be known for? And if we can say we left it out on the floor, then that's always going to be a point of re-emphasis for us post-game.
Right. Debriefing. I like it. Coach, can I ask about film then? Every program watches it different. Some watch maybe too much, some maybe don't watch enough. I don't know, I guess to each their own. But can I ask how you implement film, both maybe from game and from practice with your team? And then is it something you do as a team a lot? Do you do some individual film, maybe with assistant coaches or yourself bringing players up? How do you implement film study within your program?
Yeah, we try to, I think we've probably been heavy on the film. I would like to even maybe this year see what the less is more looks like, especially when it comes to prep. I think you can only watch so much of the other team without kind of, and for us coaches, we have to understand, we know it like the back of our hands, but what's the easiest way for them to know maybe 50% of what we know and what we see? I think I even admittedly as a fault, I've probably tried to get them to understand and know too much at times. So trying to step back, we do have kind of our Monday morning quarterback session, where we look back and at the games that week and see, I want to pick like top 5 things that we need to really work on. It might be, gosh, we're hitting no one on a screen. So we're going to work on practice on a screen. And then I'll show them like quick 5 clips where we just ghosted someone and didn't make any contact. I'm like, okay, I get why we're going to work on that. So I always want to take it back to the why. Like they have to put 2 and 2 together to me. It's like, you can't just talk about and look at film and then go practice and the practice plan not relate to anything that you want to get better at or learn. Same thing with, we have practice players, and actually our practice players watch a little bit more film on the other team than maybe our team. So we'll have a practice player session when they're watching film and they're able to go through their sets and maybe some actions that they run. And so I think our kids learn better by doing. But the visual part is just the re-emphasis. But we'll do a lot of individual film too. I think that's
Right. Right.
that they're more locked into that. They're more focused. There's more of a benefit to that for their individual game. And so in the summer, we'll do some film, but definitely when we get going here in the season, we'll have our managers and our video ops cut up film and just do individual sessions with players.
Right. I love that. And bringing it back to the why is so important. So they're understanding why you're watching. Coach, do you show film of your bench to your kids? I know it's a funny question, but just, watch it. I can see it on Synergy how much they celebrate for each other and the Benergy. It looks like a fun bench compared to maybe the other side sometimes when I was watching the film. Do you show that or do you talk about that with your team a lot?
We don't like emphasize that specifically, but if I'm ever running through film and like there's a good play and we're watching the play and what we did right, like, oh, let's run that back. Look at this Benergy right here, you guys. This makes my heart so happy. So we'll see it again, but this time they'll be looking at the bench and everyone's jumping up and down. I'm like, that is the testament of a true team that like loves and cares for their teammates, that are rooting them on. I love that. Or maybe I'll see like we're facing some adversity and the energy looks a little low. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wait, run that back. I'm like, does that look like a team who's ready to come back? Or are we just like golf clapping on the side and feeling sorry for ourselves? Like you can kind of compare benches that way.
Yep.
And so to me, it's just kind of natural to do it within a film session to just another point of emphasis. Like that was awesome energy that we just saw. Rewind that for me. And let's look at that again. So kind of high praise them on that whenever you see it. But I don't think it's something that, we just watch the bench and how we react every game. I think that too, you would just want it to be natural too. Like that's natural reaction. They don't want to think like, oh, I just have to do this because I'm being recorded and watch the bench the whole. So it just happens within the whole playback of things.
Yep, they believe in it, and it's good for them to see it sometimes, and just happens organically in film. I like that, Coach. Flipping to the offensive side, if you press, I've never really seen a pressing pressure team and then be slow on offense. It's usually you play your hand and you have live ball turnovers that I know you turn to touchdowns. But when you do get into half court, does it change? You've been a head coach now for 9 years. Do you change depending on your team? Are you running a lot of sets, or if you have a more experienced team like this year, will you let them flow a little bit more? What's the offensive mindset going into each year?
Yeah, it definitely changes. I mean, we always want to play with pace. Like we want to play with pace, even on a made basket or a dead ball. We're not going to walk the ball up. We'll have some quick hitters here that are set oriented that can hopefully isolate someone with a hot hand or a mismatch. But we're going to basically, and this year, I think I'm going to have to manufacture less than I ever have before, which is going to be great. So we're giving them some principles and concepts and maybe a little bit of organization, but they're able to play out of that organization. Even right now in the short term, it's been really fun to watch. Some depend, and I think that has to do a lot with experience. If you have a new group or a lot of freshmen, you find yourself having to manufacture some plays and some not necessarily sets, but just actions, and then having to get them set up. And I think a lot of that has to do. We got some great point guard play as well. If you have a point guard that can run the team and get them organized and point and talk and communicate, then you've got, half of your job is done for you. And that's so valuable. So I think this year we've got some great point guards as well, but we've just got some good experience that have played basketball and understand basketball concepts and have been doing it for a while. So we've got a little bit more freedom of movement, which I think will be fun and exciting to watch as well.
Right. Absolutely. And that pace is so important. Coach, this has been great. We have a few more questions. I just love the knowledge you're dropping. This is a simple question, but I get curious on baseline out of bounds plays. Do you save some for conference play? Do you run the same baseline out of bounds plays each season? I always just get curious because, I've seen some great coaches run the same plays for 20 years. And then you have some coaches who want to change it all the time. Can I just ask you about your blobs and your kind of strategy with them?
Yeah, we've mixed it up a little bit. Like I've got like a handful of go-tos that I always know will be part of the package.
Sure.
But then I think every year we're like, oh, we need to get her touches, or she's very capable. She's very consistent from three. Let's try to set up some things. And then I think for us, we always like towards the end of the year, we have like board to court sessions. So maybe like an ATO, they'll have seen it in practice. Like it won't be completely new, but it will be of nothing that like we've ran before or that is part of our playbook or sets. So I think that's always important to do is practice those board to court situations. It also gives myself and our assistants a good opportunity to kind of on the fly draw something up. And
Right.
This year's I've kind of one of our new assistant, Laura Dinkins, I'm like, your blobs, I'm going to give those to you. You're going to do them. Cause I also think if someone can take ownership and make it their own and have emphasis, then there's just another thing to spotlight and highlight. So I don't know what they'll look like this year. I'm like delegating blobs, but I do think it's important to like ATOs, you just work on them. So it's not the first time they've seen them, but you get kind of an idea of how to go board to court.
Yep, I like that. Very situational oriented. You're prepared for all situations that way. The way you practice. Speaking of delegating, Coach, being the head coach now, going into your 10th year, I know delegating to your staff is extremely important. Can I ask first, maybe practice wise, do you have a coach in charge of posts, guards? Do you have a coach watching rebound? Like, how do you delegate who's doing what in practice? And then after practice, I guess what it looks like on the bench during the games also with your staff.
Yeah, we're definitely a team approach. I mean, I've got a phenomenal staff. They're very, wise from a basketball standpoint. They know how to communicate. So it's an open forum, really. Now I've been able to kind of have a staff member focus on offense a little bit more, so I can really lock in on defense. When I was doing both, it was just like, double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
So that's been great for me these past couple of years, just to kind of be able to focus on defense and hand over some offensive concepts. But we'll work with everyone. We'll work with everyone, but then there will be, if we're kind of mixed up into post perimeter, we'll have a staff member that's with the guards and a staff member with the post players. And then we also have academic teams, and that's a mixture. So then, you might not just have your post coach with the post kids all the time. Like we'll have about 4 academic teams that we make sure kids that they'll check in with. And then we, at the beginning of the year, we also have groups that rotate through the assistant coaches and myself, and we go do something fun with each group. So it's very interactive amongst everyone, which I like because I think it gives you ownership and you're not just boxed into one thing and one group and one position. So and then on the bench, it's like any suggestions come my way, we'll huddle. What I really appreciate about my coaches is they have a pulse on the bench, as I'm kind of looking at the floor. So if you need to do damage control, if you need to pump someone up, if you need to explain a play on a blackboard, you can. So I think that's really important. Just lots of kind of antennas up on the bench and what's needed in that moment for our players that maybe aren't out on the court.
Right. I like that, Coach, because there's a lot of staffs that are buried in their clipboards and, during games and not maybe interactive with the players. They miss something because they're statting. We get stats from the people who bring them to us. I don't know why staffs do that, but I understand that. I guess, can I ask then one more question, staying with that a little bit about stats? How do you incorporate stats or analytics in your program? Is there a certain stat that you're looking at, maybe defensively or offensively, that's more important than others to you personally?
Yeah. Well, I mean, before this year, your ops people could not coach beyond court coaches. So we had them doing like some of our stats, and it wasn't really, I mean, you get the box score and then you can go back and break down game film afterwards. Like some things that they stat are like our intangibles. So we'll have like an intangible box score, which means like, no, you didn't space cut, off a dribble penetration, you didn't deploy, you didn't drift, or you didn't lift, or whatever the space cut was. So if someone's tallying those up, a coach could say like, hey, you're not moving on offense. When the ball drives at you, you got to get away. When the ball goes away from you, you're filling in behind. So that would be an example, or like deflections or like non-rotations. So we actually have our own little box score sheet that has charges. Like that's not statted in a normal box score. So some intangibles for us, we call them non-negotiables
Okay.
that maybe a manager will stat. But yeah, I'm a big believer, like assistants, none of our assistants are required to stat anything. They're
Okay.
all within kind of the game scheme and
Yep.
the acknowledgement of what needs to be happen on the bench. So, but we'll go back and stat some things. I mean, the biggest thing for us is conversions. Like I want to stat conversions every time because we're forcing a lot of open court steals. Like
Right.
how good are we
Okay.
in scoring it at the other
Yep.
end?
Yep.
So conversions will definitely go back and we'll look at those too. Like, hey, we converted, 30% of the time. We want to be better, if we're in these 2-on-1 situations. So I think that's something we'll go back and stat. But efficiency, you look at it, but the game just plays out so many different ways. Like I don't get too caught up in some of that data. I really like breaking down game film and looking more at concepts and overall view. But it can also be good for a kid that comes in like, I need the ball in my hands a little more. And we've always said, a good shot is one that you've proven you can make. And the stats don't lie on something like that.
Right.
So they are very a helpful tool.
Right. I like that, Coach. Second last question. This is wonderful. What advice would you have for somebody in their first year as a head coach? Now you're going into your 10th year. Your record, coach, is incredible. What you did at Drury, what you're doing there. It's just an incredible record. But I know it goes beyond wins and losses being a head coach. There's so many responsibilities. And no matter what, that first year as a head coach, whether you're young, an older person in their first year, it's a lot. What would be the advice that you would give to somebody entering their first year as a head coach?
Yeah, you got to take your breathers. I should have taken my own advice on that one in the beginning because you just feel like you have to get everything in and you have to establish your identity and your brand. And honestly, when I got the Grand Canyon job during COVID, it was kind of a blessing in disguise because I couldn't do all that. I couldn't get my kids on the court and implement an offense and put in all these defensive strategies. So we kind of had to take a step back and be creative. One of the creative things we did was they kind of watched my past teams do the defense. So they got to see what it looks like and get excited about it. So they understood the vision. And so I think that's a big thing that if I were to do it all over again, I probably needed to have them understand the vision before throwing a bunch of drills out there and concepts out there. And we're going to do this. And so that was something that because I think they understood the vision, they bought into really, really fast. And by January, my first year, we were the number 1 team in the country in turnovers forced. And so, it translated from Division 1 to Division 2 to Division 1. And I was very convicted to that style. So I hoped it translated.
Right.
But I think they were just so bought in and they understood it because they saw the vision. And so that's the biggest thing is getting them to see the vision, but then to buy into the vision. And then they'll run through a brick wall for you to implement the vision. So the other thing is, why will they run through a brick wall for you? Well, hopefully there's trust and there's relationships and they're competitive and they're like-minded and they're wired like you. So I think all those things are important to get to know the kids and the players and the person outside basketball. So when there are tough moments and you have to challenge them, then they're going to respond appropriately. So getting to know your new team, that's huge. Taking them over to your house, spending some extra time. But then from a basketball standpoint, really getting them to understand the vision and where you want to take the program, I think is huge.
Right. No, that's great advice, Coach. That's great advice. And that's a really great point that you had that time in COVID and probably Zooms and, like you said, watching film, maybe not together, but over the computer, that probably did help them see the vision.
Yeah, lots of communication. When you get in your office, you get really busy and then you're practice playing, you're watching film, but you couldn't be in the office during COVID. So I was texting kids. We were watching one-on-one film. We were watching team Zoom film. We were doing things to fill our time that weren't basketball related. So get to know you games over Zoom, or we wrote letters to our senators about during the Floyd incident. So that was really cool to be able to share with each other. So it was just a powerful thing, a learning opportunity for me that I didn't know I needed, but kind of helped me understand how people operate and how teams should look. And I would have been rushed to get everything in. I would have been so anxious, chomping at the bit, but forcefully taking a step back was definitely a benefit. So I know hopefully nothing like COVID forces
No.
us to do that again,
Right.
but implementing that same mindset when you're
Yep.
taking over a program, I think would be a benefit.
Yep. And I love what you said about being able to take your breathers when you need them to. Coach, this has been wonderful. We have to leave with the question we ask all our guests is if someone's visiting your town, and I know you live in a big city in Phoenix, obviously, and they're coming to a game and they want to eat somewhere local, do you have a spot where you would send them?
Oh, I'm such a foodie. So
Okay.
this
This is
was
a good
such a
question
great
then. Yeah.
question, but there's so many
Yep.
spots. But if you're coming to a game, like about 10 minutes from campus is North Central Phoenix. And there's like a little line of restaurants that and anyone comes out of town, I'll do like this little food crawl. So you'll start at Postino's and get like a prosciutto board, appetizers. Then you'll skip over to Joyride Taco, which is right next door. It's like a Mexican place. They have the best street corn and guacamole. And then you can I like the shrimp taco. And then you'll go to Federal's Pizza and they have all these unique pizzas. So grab share a slice of pizza, a couple slices. The Casanova, it doesn't sound appeasing and appealing, but it is so good. So like the foodie in me does a little food crawl right there. So that's where I take my guests. So if you're in Phoenix,
I love it.
hit us up. We'll go to the food crawl and come to a game.
Coach, I love that. And that's the first food crawl we got. We usually get one, you brought 3 restaurants in, a prosciutto board. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. That was
Foodie.
awesome. Foodie. Thank you, Coach. I can't thank you enough for taking time to be on Basketball and Brew podcast. You dropped great knowledge. Wish you the best of luck this season. I know you guys are going to get it. Good luck going for that WAC championship.
Thanks for having me, and good luck to everyone out there. And thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Coach Miller. Wow, great stuff from Coach Miller today. So much knowledge. They have a great program. She has a great record, and you can see why if you heard that podcast. I want to thank our sponsors again right here in San Marcos. We have Pie Society, great place for pizza. We have Zelix Ice House, great place for friends and beer and a good time. I want to thank my awesome producer, Jude McLaren, who makes all this happen. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe. Please subscribe to our podcast before you get off, and stay tuned for our next one. Thanks again to our guest, Molly Miller, for dropping knowledge. We'll see you next time.